There is a lot of buzz going around the city of Atlanta right now, and that's right. We are talking about the Georgia Tech Yellowjacket football team. Heading them as head coach, Brent Key looks to bolster his coaching staff and his roster heading into the 2024 season, his second full-time head coaching season with the Yellowjackets, as most of y'all might remember. And Brad reminded me that he was an interim coach 3 years ago for the Georgia Tech Yellowjackets after the firing of their former coach, Jeff Collins. Brad, I'll turn it over to you in a second. We've got a lot to cover with this team, but I was telling you before the podcast, man, this is an exciting football team when you really dive into the weeds. A lot of people in the ACC are going to look at teams like Miami. They're going to look at other teams like Clemson and Florida State for the ACC. But I'm telling you what, Georgia Tech has a really, really good shot at having a successful season in 2024. We're heading to Atlanta, Georgia to give you an inside look at the Georgia Tech Yellowjacket football program heading into the 2024 season. I'm Nathan Johnston here with my co-host Brad Hopkins. It's time to break the huddle. Brad, as I mentioned in the intro, Georgia Tech, a very, very fascinating team heading into the 2024 season. What are your thoughts on the Yellowjackets, on Brent Key, and what are some just give us some of your takes, maybe some underrated players and coaches on this staff?
Absolutely, Nate. So I got to say, I was really, really impressed with the job that Brent Key did last year. He took over pretty early in 2022 for Jeff Collins and has done a fascinating job there. He's coaching his alma mater, so you know that he's taken a lot of pride in that program. And this is a guy that has got an impressive pedigree. Of course, he was Alabama's offensive line coach for a couple seasons, and then came back to Atlanta to be the assistant head coach and the offensive line coach at Georgia Tech, and then of course got the head coaching gig. And I was impressed with what he did last year. 7-6. They won their bowl game. They had a winning record in the conference, and I was just really, really impressed with what he did. And they, when you think about Georgia Tech, of course, a very, very, very good school for academics. To an extent, that limits who they can go out and recruit, obviously. But I look at Georgia Tech, and it's a team that I think has done a really, really good job in the transfer portal. I mean, it's one of those teams that you think about in a program that they have utilized the transfer portal extremely, extremely well. And of course, if you're a Georgia Tech fan or if you watch Georgia Tech at all last year, you know that Haynes King, who of course started his career at Texas A&M, was a big reason that the Yellowjackets were able to have a winning record, and a big reason that the Yellowjackets were able to win, to have a winning record in the ACC. And I was impressed with him, a true dual threat guy. I thought developed more as a passer. Yes, for those Texas A&M fans, that's a knock against Jimbo Fisher. But in all seriousness, I thought that he looked really, really good. Stepping into now 2024, a few things, Nate, that I want to hit on. First of all, I wish I was able to go to this game, but opening up against Florida State in Ireland, that's going to be a great, great atmosphere. That's going to be fun. I'm glad that college football has gone international, but I want to be honest and upfront, and I think keep expectations realistic. And hey, if I have to eat crow later on here, I will. I don't think Georgia Tech is going to be in the ACC championship hunt. However, I do think they easily have a chance to build on that 7-6 record. Maybe get to 8 wins, and I think Brent Key is building something good there. I'm a big fan of his offensive coordinator, Buster Faulkner, who's back for his second season. Nate, I want to talk about real quick an up-and-coming head coach, their first-year defensive coordinator, Tyler Santucci. He's just 35 years old. He's got a really, really good pedigree. He's been at Texas A&M. He's been at Wake Forest. He was the defensive coordinator at Duke last year under Mike Elko, and that's an impressive thing to me. So he's coming to Atlanta. I think he's got a really good chance to take that Georgia Tech defense to the next level, and making that transition. We talk about transfer portal. Georgia Tech went out and really their focus in the portal was on defensive players, and I'm impressed. And I'm looking at 247. Speaking about this and doing my research, but their top guys for the transfer portal all on the defensive side of the football. Jordan Vanderberg, a defensive lineman from Penn State, great size on him. Same thing, defensive lineman Io Tafase from Florida State, another defensive lineman. Linebacker EJ Lightsey, a linebacker that transferred from Georgia. Defensive lineman that transferred from Furman, Jack Barton. And then finally, a couple of corners. Warren Burrell, he transferred from Tennessee. And then Nate, here on Break the Huddle, we love these FCS to FBS transfers. Saeed Gibbs transferred from Rhode Island. So Georgia Tech, I'm really impressed with what they did. Maybe not big time splash names, but some guys that give you a lot of a football experience, some good size there, and some depth. So I think Georgia Tech fans have a right to be excited. Like I said, I think that 7 to 8 wins is a good season, but I think Brent Key is doing a really good job there. I think it's important for the Georgia Tech athletic administration to continue to show, good faith in him, to continue to put money into the program, into the facilities. I think reason for optimism in Atlanta.
Yeah, Brad. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more on all those points you hit on. I want to add to the defensive staff that you mentioned. You mentioned Tyler Santucci, the D coordinator position. He also Brent Key brought in a couple of position coaches as well on the defensive side. And Brad, I truly love talking about the position coaches when it comes to college football. I think they make a huge impact when it comes to recruiting, when it comes to player development. Those are the guys that are working with the players day in and day out while the head coach is running the program. I want to start off with new outside linebackers / edge coach Kyle Pope, who has a fantastic pedigree in himself as well. Comes over he's been coaching as a defensive line coach at Memphis the last 3 years, really helped out them a lot. And this is a guy that played at a program in Jacksonville State, a very well-known program, and he played from 2011 to 2014, a younger guy as well, as you mentioned, Brad, on the defensive side, coached as a grad assistant for Alabama from 2017 to 2018, so got to work under Nick Saban for a little bit. And then, like I said, he's coached at Memphis. He's had some experience with the Los Angeles Chargers last year as well during training camp, and then ended up back at Memphis last year in the fall as the defensive run game coordinator. Yeah, that's going to be a really good fit for the Georgia Tech Yellowjackets as they try to compete in the ACC. And then one final name, and Brad, I'm sure you're very familiar with this guy, Jeff Simpson, former Buford head coach back in the day. He's been circling around the ACC. We know he was a defensive assistant for the Atlanta Falcons for a little bit, bounced around, like I said, to the ACC, Miami, Duke, a couple of schools, but now he lands back in his home state of Georgia with the Georgia Tech Yellowjackets as the defensive line coach. And this is a great addition as well with his experience both in college and the ACC. He knows how that conference runs. He knows those teams in and out. He's been coaching around them for years. He also, like I mentioned, he coached as a head coach at Buford High School in the state of Georgia. That's going to be huge when it comes to recruiting guys in the state of Georgia. And look, we transfer over to the offense for a second. We talked about Haynes King and the development that he had last year at Georgia Tech as opposed to Texas A&M the year before. And I think a lot of that falls on the success of offensive coordinator Buster Faulkner, who's coming into his second year as offensive coordinator. This is a guy who has much experience, and most recently, as most of you Georgia fans will know, he's the one that helped Stetson Bennett during his tenure at the University of Georgia. Stetson Bennett, a very underrated guy who wasn't expected to do much. Next thing you know, he's a 2-time national champion. Having said all of that, I don't know if Georgia Tech has the depth to compete at the highest level to get to an ACC championship, much less a playoff contender. However, I think when you look at this coaching staff, Brad, you have to think that, like you mentioned, this team is capable of taking the step in the right direction next year. And I would even venture to say, this is just my hot take, forget 8 wins. I think they can win 9 or 10 games next year. I really do believe that. And when you look at the signees that they have coming in the freshman class, you talked a lot about some of the defensive transfers, and I want to touch on a couple of offensive transfers. And first guy I want to talk about is transfer tight end Rylan Goad. And most of you Georgia fans know who this guy is. He played at Georgia, I think, for 3 or 4 years. Transferred to Mississippi State last year. Didn't work out there. Now he's transferred back to the state of Georgia, where he's from, Ackworth, Georgia. And look, sometimes it doesn't pan out for guys at bigger programs, but I think this is a guy that can be a plug and play guy for the Georgia Tech Yellowjackets offense. I think he's going to be a tremendous upgrade for Haynes King. He's a 4-star tight end, 6'6", 240. So look for him. And then a couple other guys that I want to mention as well. Jordan Van Den Berg from Lilburn, Georgia, coming back to the state of Georgia as well. Played at Providence Christian Academy, 6'3", 310 pounds. This is a big boy coming over from Penn State. Maybe it's the coaching turnover with Manny Diaz leaving, as well as Simpson coming in to coach the D-line. This could be a huge upgrade for them, and he's back home as well. You touched on a lot of key guys, and I want to mention a couple other guys in the signee class. I noticed that they have a lot of interior offensive linemen and a lot of offensive linemen in general. They're really big on signing offensive linemen. They got offensive tackle Jordan Floyd out of Parkview High School, right up the road from me and Brad. 6'5.5", 295. I think he can get up to over 300 by the time he gets on campus. Then you look at a guy like Santana Alo Tupua. This is a big boy, Brad. I don't know if you had a chance to see this guy. Interior offensive lineman. He's only 6'1", but he's 325 pounds. This is a big kid. And when you look at the size of these defensive tackles nowadays in the college football era, you need some guys like that up front to really plug those holes and really fill the spot in the A and B gap. So you make sure that your run game is efficient. And if there's a linebacker blitz, well, maybe this guy can take on 2 guys at once because he's got the size for it, no doubt. Georgia Tech, I think they're going to build off of what they built last year. And if you look ahead into the 2024 season, you mentioned that they got to play Florida State right off the bat. Brad, look, I'm just going to throw this out here too. What if Georgia Tech goes and beats Florida State week 1? Florida State's breaking in a new quarterback in DJU. They got a whole new offense. Do they have the better roster on paper? Absolutely. But you're traveling over to Ireland. I think anything can happen, and it's not to say that I think Florida State is going to lose, but I'm just saying if Georgia Tech comes out and it even keeps it remotely close, we might be looking at this team going, okay, maybe they got a better chance at winning some ball games than we thought they did heading into the 2024 season. It's time to break the huddle.